The new dirt bikes are out. We've got some tests. I'm going to use Dirt Bike Magazine, maybe a little motocross action. We'll see. But this is a reaction video to the Shootout. I do not know who wins if I had to pick off the top of my head. I don't really want it to be an Austrian bike. I want it to be a Husky, a Gas, or a KTM. Why? I know the last 3 bikes I've owned have all been Huskies. Actually, the last 4, 5 bikes I've owned have been... 250s, yeah, they've all been Huskies. So, I don't know. I like the Honda. I kind of want to see the Kawi win. It would be cool to actually have the Suzuki win, but we know that's not going to be a thing. And this is the 450 because that's the bike I'm going to be buying is a 450. I don't really care for 250s. I think you have to ride them too hard. They're too much maintenance, and they're slow. 450s, you can just kind of lean back, use the power if you want it. Don't use it if you don't want it because they're scary fast.
The 450 Shootout is always a very big...
The Suzuki looks cool, though. It does. The blue and yellow. And honestly, the gas looks cool.
Deal for us this year is special because we have a
not a big fan of the white Yamaha.
Wild card in the mix.
Or the Husky.
Kawasaki KX450 is all new this year. It was the win.
Yep. Kawi is all new. Yeah, if I had to pick, I'm almost thinking the Kawi's going to win.
Last year, so we want to know how it stacks up with the others. The gas is also new for this year, while the Yamaha, the Honda, the KTM, and the Husqvarna all got major revamps last year. We've got a lot of testing to do.
Okay, all right. Let's see here. What are they saying about the...
It's a new bike this year.
Oh.
But it was no surprise. It now has the same frame and motor that the KTM and Husqvarna got last year. The bodywork
the cheapest one, $10,300.
Of course, and so are a number of components. Gas has softer suspension settings than the other Austrian bikes. It has a forged triple clamp, brake tech brakes and hydraulics, Maxxis tires, and different bars and rims. It also comes without a map switch or resonance chamber.
Dude, if this wins Bike of the Year, because it's one step above the Suzuki as far as this is just kind of bare minimum when it comes to pieces and parts on the stuff. And the Austrian bikes, they're more, not the KTM. The KTM is their flagship guy, but the Husky and the Gas, those two usually have like simpler settings that go towards more of the vet riders, right? And if you think about a lot of the guys that are paying 10 grand for this motorcycle, the majority of them are vet guys. So I would say that maybe they do own the majority market share for this stuff. So there is a possibility, right? That's one thing that I loved about my Husky is that the motor wasn't so just rip your arms off like a Yamaha is or even a Honda these days. Kawi's used to be. I haven't ridden a newer Kawi since 2019, so I'm a little bit off on at least the Kawi, but the Yamaha and the KTM and all of them. KTM hits the hardest for the Austrian bikes. The Husky and Gas are comparable, but they're softer. They're more usable just right out of the box to not rip your arms off.
In the head pipe. Accordingly, it sells for a little less than the other Austrian bikes. At $10,399. Here are the strongest points for the Gas. It has a great motor. It has excellent low end, it revs out well, and it's very controllable, especially considering how fast it is. It's the lightest bike in the whole Shootout. On our scale, it comes in at 228 pounds without fuel. Not surprisingly,
that is
it
a dry
like a very light
Glen
bike.
Helen.
It turns with very little effort and has no real issues in the stability department. The suspension is definitely cushy on the Gas. It uses the same WP shock and air fork as the KTM, but the valving is softer and it is more in line with intermediate level riders. The controls are all excellent. These are the best brake tech brakes we've tested yet.
Brembo is still where you go. Here, let's look at the Honda
50R. This bike is unchanged for 2024.
I love the ads
but it
here,
got a new
the
frame
SC1.
and a very
It is
different
actually good
personality
shit, though.
last year. The previous bike was a brute.
Just don't get
it
it on
made
your
so much
brake
power that
pads.
most of the changes
Whoa.
moving
How
on
much
to the
was it?
Honda CRF. Previous bike was a brute. It made so much power that most of the
damn,
changes in
it's less.
2023 were aimed at making it more controllable.
I do like how we're getting the fat bomb on the newer bikes where you don't necessarily need to go buy a $1,500 pipe, but you do need to get the backfire screen out of these suckers or the spark arresters, whatever they are. Yeah, you can't go ride in the woods, but most people don't have the stickers to go ride in the woods anyway. But I would like the factory editions. This isn't even on these bikes, but it would be nice if the factory editions come with some kick-ass foot pegs and some other cooler pieces, parts, like an actual Hinson basket or Recluse, like really strong basket, not just the clutch cover to me, because that's just aesthetically. I want stuff that's going to be sound, because as a racer, most of the guys that are putting hours and hours, 50 to 100 hours on these bikes, these clutch baskets get so notchy, they're just, ugh.
Interestingly enough, you can still buy the earlier version of the Honda. It's called the CRF 450 RS and sells for $88.99. The current...
See, that is a good marketing deal where you could just buy last year's model, but it's brand new. It's like going to go buy a used motorcycle, but this one is brand new. I do like the ideology behind all that for the marketing gurus at Honda.
One is $96.99. There are 3 maps available through a handlebar switch as well as traction control.
Just based off of price, I say you buy the Honda over the gas because you're just getting nicer stuff on it.
The suspension is Showa, and the brakes and hydraulic clutch are...
And of course, the Lawrence brothers are going to win on the Honda.
Both Nissan. Tops on the list of strong points for the Honda is its low-end power. Below 7,500 RPM, it positively crushes everything else. Throttle response is immediate and crisp. It also has very quick, responsive steering. The Honda handles light. Actually, it falls right in the middle as far as real weight goes. It's 233 pounds without fuel on our scale. The Honda is a comfortable bike. The layout is roomy, the seat is not too soft, not too hard, and the controls are all good, including the map switch. The weakest point on the Honda is its frame rigidity. It has the stiffest feel of all, and that makes suspension setup even more difficult. Light riders might not be able to take off enough spring preload in the rear to get the recommended 105 millimeters of race sag.
You're really going to just change springs anyway. I do like the power of the new Hondas. Before, they used to not have hardly any bottom end torque to them, so they've definitely have designed the inner workings of the horsepower machine that Honda used to own everything. And really, anybody's going to switch suspension right out of the box, really. But I guess if you're looking at to just have a bike right out of the box, well, then those Austrian bikes are pretty much going to be just set to go. I know I personally just send my stuff off to Factory Connections as soon as I get it, because I'm such a light guy. There's really hard for any motorcycle to fit me right, and that's just it, me being 150 pounds.
We also feel the power drops off too dramatically on top. Realistically, we can't complain that any of these bikes is lacking in power, but the Honda goes from being the strongest bike at low revs to being one of the weakest on top. The transition is a little sudden and forces you to shift maybe before you're ready.
You're always going to short shift these motorcycles, so all right, let's look at this Husky
C450 gas, but there are a number of differences that give it a separate identity.
Oh, yuck on the price and the aesthetics of it. I do not like. Let's do black and yellow. Let's do black and yellow, not gray and yellow.
With less seat height. That's because the suspension travel is slightly reduced on the FC450. The Husky uses Brembo brakes and hydraulics. It has DID Dirt Star rims.
The DID Dirt Star rims are where it's at. The Brembo brakes are where it's at. The hydraulic clutch is where it's at. So much plastic on these bikes is just, okay, the gray doesn't look awful. It doesn't look awful. Maybe I'm just a Husky guy at heart, because I'm guessing this guy's going to be top 3.
A Pro Taper handlebar, and a composite airbox subframe structure. The FC450 has the highest price of any bike in the Shootout. The MSRP is $11,199. The Husky's strongest point, just like the other Austrian bikes, is its motor. It's very fast and still controllable. The FC450 might actually have the best manners of the 3 because of its smooth mid-range. The quick shift feature is useful for most riders, but for the others, it can be turned off easily. The reduced seat height has no real downside. Everyone likes being...
Yeah, the quick shift, I I don't know. It's just something that you got to get used to. Again, it's almost like the GP shifting on road bikes, street bikes, where down is up and up is down because those guys are so leaned over. If you do it long enough, you will get used to it, but there's just that transition. Again, this is going towards those electric bikes. Gears are just going to go away at some point.
Being able to touch the ground more easily, especially on the start line. Overall handling
I do like
is
the
excellent.
narrator. He's
it
doing a
turns
really
well
good job, by
and
the way.
remains level on acceleration. It's very light, only 1 pound heavier than the gas.
They got
at
a good script.
229 pounds without fuel. We love the clutch, we love the brakes, we love the grips, we love the bars. As far as weak points, the chassis is very supercross oriented. That means it's stiff and puts too much burden on perfect suspension setup. The WP suspension can't really be called a weak point, but it can't adequately compensate for the chassis rigidity. You can get it right, but be prepared to do a lot of testing.
I always thought the Austrian bikes flexed a little bit more, but okay. Look at the Cowie.
Thing is new. But to go over some of the major details briefly, the motor has a center port exhaust, the front brake is a Brembo, and the rear brake is a redesigned Nissan. Kawasaki paid a great deal of attention to the electronics.
Interesting that
package.
it's not.
It has a handlebar switch with
Both Brembos.
mild and aggressive maps available on the fly, plus traction control. Kawasaki now offers the Rideology smartphone app for engine tuning, very much like Yamaha's Power.
Which is awesome. Every manufacturer should be able to have an app to where you can adjust, go richer or leaner, or upload to those darn buttons.
Tuner. The price for the new KX450 is now $10,399.
You notice all of them have the fat
strongest part of the Kawasaki.
The Cowie, if I go back just a little bit, that exhaust is not near as big.
$399.
The sucker used to stick way the heck out there.
The strongest part of the Kawasaki.
Wouldn't it be cool to see Adam Cincerillo or El Hombre, Jason Anderson, win on this bike?
Kawasaki is that they didn't mess it up. It was probably tempting for them to pump up the motor and go after peak power. Controllability is a much more important feature for us, and Kawasaki scores well there. The motor is super easy to use. It builds power and then tapers off in a smooth, controllable fashion.
Honestly, that's why those 350s would be the king. If you could have as much bottom end torque on a 350 as you do a 450, you ride that sucker all day. But every 350 that I've ridden, it sucks. It's a heavy motorcycle, and it's just not a good middle ground between 450 and 250. I just want a 250 feel, but a 450 power. And the 450 power is honestly already too much. And for them to be talking a little bit about power, I'm like, you can't, nobody really uses all of it to begin with. It's more about usable power. That's what the factories have with their ECUs. It's not like they're riding a big bore. The reason why people put big bores in their bikes is to get the bottom end torque up. But factories, they can do that with their programming, and that's why those factory ECUs are unobtainium. That's the whole reason what happened at Loretta with Deegan's bike is that was like factory Yamaha stuff with that ECU that Star Yamaha couldn't get rid of because they didn't own the intellectual property. At least that's everything that I got out of what was actually going on, right? So there's a reason why you don't go get a big bore 500cc 450 because you don't need that much bottom end torque. But truthfully, if you could big bore your 350, that would be a decent bike to go race around on.
The chassis is very compliant. Kawasaki doesn't beat you up. The suspension gets equal credit. It's a comfortable bike at any speed. This year, the steering is faster and more responsive, but still, the KX is the most stable bike at speed. The brakes are strong, the clutch pull is easy, and the controls are excellent. Even the grips, which are now ODI lock-ons. On the list of weak points, we should probably include its soft motor output because the Kawasaki still gives up horsepower to the Yamaha and all the Austrian.
Yeah, it's funny how Honda used to be the slow guy and Cowie was the beefy guy, and they kind of swapped a little bit down low on there.
It's a different airbox, and that gives the motor a different, so it's easy. The same. The differences are worth talking about.
This is KTM.
KTM has a different airbox, and that gives the motor a different feel. The suspension setup is different, so is the handlebar, the bodywork.
Yeah, the airbox is always different. It's more open, and it always has been on the KTM, and that's why it's that more grunty. It's not the whole vet type motor usability. It's a little bit more in your face, rip your arms off type deal, and it's all because of that airbox.
Work and the rims. Still, the most important parts are the motor and the frame, so many of the KTM's strengths and weaknesses.
Dude, every Husky that I've owned, these frame bolts, they always go loose.
Will sound familiar. The bike's biggest strength, as you might expect by now, is the motor. It's not a monster, but it's still very powerful. On the dyno, the KTM produces the highest peak power of them all, even if it only beats its Austrian siblings by a few tenths. The difference is still noticeable on the track. Cornering is another strong part that the KTM shares with the Husky and the Gas. It drops into turns easily, has very light steering. On the scale, the KTM is the same as the Husky at 229 pounds without fuel. Most riders say the KTM is the best overall suspension of the Austrian bikes. It rides higher in its travel than the Gas and has a little more travel than the Husky. Riders might also be feeling different flex characteristics from the subframe.
If you're going to go race at an A level or even an amateur, if you're going with an Austrian bike, it's probably best to be a KTM unless you can get a deal on one of its siblings, the Gas or Husky. And you can always drill holes into your airbox. You know, I've done that before. So that would be my scenario for this stuff. But I don't think that this guy is going to win the shootout, but I may be wrong. Oh, yeah. This is the winner.
For a long time. The Suzuki has a lot of...
It's still $9,000.
God. It is a worthwhile
Dang.
consideration, despite being a product of an earlier time. Our test bike is the RM Army Edition, which is still available through some dealers. It has a Yoshimura exhaust and special graphics. The 2024 RMZ 450 also comes with an EFI tuning tool manufactured by Get Athena. It's still the most affordable bike in the comparison at $9,199.
Truthfully, not, because they were just saying that the Honda for last year's SE is like $8,500, but it's last year's model. And the Suzuki's like 15-year-old model.
$9. The top item on the Suzuki's list of overall strong points is still its handling. It turns easily without being nervous or hyper. It's actually very stable. We know from experience that the Suzuki chassis is very compliant. It was designed long before the current movement towards more supercross-oriented traits and increased rigidity. Obviously, it worked.
All right, I'm just skipping this guy because we all know it's not winning.
Bike and still impresses us as much as ever. Everything was new: the frame, the motor, the bodywork, everything. Now the 2024 model is unchanged, but we're always discovering new personalities because of the Yamaha Power Tuner smartphone.
The Power Tuner is the best thing of all the bikes that they have, and they've used this for 7-8 years now. Maybe, yeah, I think they have. So I'm disappointed that the other manufacturers haven't already implemented something like that. But truth be told, why would you buy a 2024 Yamaha just for this pinkish graphics when you could get the same bike at 2023? You know, sorry, Yamaha manufacturers, the plastic's not enough to just go buy a brand new bike, but you might not be able to find a brand new 2023.
App. That allows you to cook up your own power delivery and change the bike dramatically. The YZ450F you see in this video is the 50th anniversary edition. It sells for $10,199, which is $200 more than the standard version, but there are no mechanical differences. First of all, the YZ...
Oh, so it's just an extra edition for $200. Yeah, go buy a 2023.
Feels like it has the most power. That's because it climbs very steeply in the middle of the power band, and that makes for a very thrilling ride.
And the front end of these bikes, they feel like no other motorcycle with the way the front is loaded and the radiators. It sounds like a weed whacker, but yet when you're going in corners, it turns. I would say that this bike is going to turn better than the other bikes.
Standard power delivery is a little too much. It's easy to modify. There are a zillion maps available, and you will like one of them. power tuner is a great tool. A traditional strong point for Yamaha has always been suspension. This one is no different. The rougher the track and the faster the pace, the better the YZ450 works. And finally, ergonomics are a strong point. This is new. Instead of being cramped up, the Yamaha is now spread out and comfortable. It's also much lighter and much more agile than the YZs of the old days.
You know,
the
this guy's not
2024
saying
version
much about...
is the lightest of the Japanese 450s at 231 pounds.
Not saying much about the suspension as far as spring or not.
On the negative side, all that power in the standard configuration can be a handful. It's actually hard to keep the front end down. That combines with very responsive steering to make things happen very quickly. You have to keep up with the Yamaha. For many riders, mastering the Power Tuner app is going to be a necessity, simply to make the bike more controllable.
All right, I'm going to say second. I'm going to say the Yamaha ends up second.
Yamaha Showdown. The Yamaha has power and suspension. The Kawasaki has manageability and handling. Last year, we chose the Kawasaki by the slimmest of margins. So the new KX would actually have to be a step backward if it were to lose against the unchanged Yamaha. But in no uncertain terms, we have to say the new KX is not a step backwards. In sheer performance, it might be a lateral move. No better, no worse. But in technology and potential, it is a big step forward.
So is that right?
As far as the others go, we once again see the Husqvarna and KTM taking the next
Yamaha.
2 positions, followed by the Gas, Honda, and Suzuki. It's a very tightly grouped bunch of motorcycles again.
Yep, cool. Cool, got that right. Ah, that's funny. I got all three of it right. Good for me. Well, hey, this is Johnny Hopper. Appreciate all you guys. Till next time, keep it WFO, brah.